Amir before on the dark web that will like kind of do a bit of a string search, but it'll
This is cool. Let's podcast it. Yeah. let's do that for the podcast. Okay, I'm ready.
What's the plan, person? Welcome back.
CyberSpace.
In miracle treatment. Do you know what I mean? So like they're like in miracle treatment. Welcome back.
Hello and welcome back to the CyberSpace podcast. It's me, Josh, doing another intro on my own because we've got a very special part 2 of Kyree, the GRC, the Governance Risk and Compliance Specialist, giving us more insights into what it takes to be a governance risk and compliance analyst. Kyree introduced himself in the last pod, but if you are just joining in and catching in now, or you want a little bit of a refresher, Kyree is an IT risk analyst who is out there on TikTok, Instagram, social media, sharing his experiences and his journey into that space. If you listen to the last episode, we talked about his journey, how he really found himself excelling in there after a few internships, never anything he really thought he would fall into. But he now wants to help people kind of get into governance risk and compliance also. So another great mentor who you could have access to. But without even the need for one-on-one mentorship, you can get a lot of value out of what Kyree's going to be talking about. So Rob and I will ask him a bunch of questions, share our own thoughts of how we see GRC fitting into our daily lives as cybersecurity analysts or in our roles since then. I hope you enjoy. Let us know if you have any comments or questions for Kyree. Kyree is very keen to be back on the podcast. I'm very keen to have him on as maybe our special guest who pops up every now and then, because I think he gives a great perspective that maybe is a little bit different from what we're focused on in the trenches of cybersecurity sometimes. So let us know if any comments for him. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and we'll jump right back into the conversation with Robbie and Kyree, discussing the soft skills that it takes to get into cybersecurity and governance risk and compliance, and maybe the lack of focus on there from the outside. So let's jump to it.
We try and raise this point to as many people as we can, the importance of concentrating on your soft skills, especially when you're trying to break into any, industry within cybersecurity, because that is often overlooked. When you're prepping for interviews, they're, swatting for all of their technical questions. But then when it comes to soft skills, somebody asks you, okay, talk about yourself from like all of your strengths, or let me know what you think your honest weaknesses are, or what would your previous employer describe you? And they freeze up and they don't know what to say. And it's like, how have you not prepped this? This is equally as important, because, you're going to be, are you a good cultural fit, or like, are you going to be somebody that's going to be a good worker and be able to, work well within the team? And
everything else can be taught. Everything else can be taught. Like in terms of like you want to know how to do a risk assessment. Most companies have a methodology on how they do risk assessments. There's usually some sort of confluence documentation on the step-by-step process of like how to do the risk assessment. So the knowledge is there, but if you don't have the soft skills to be able to sort of like purvey that in the correct way, right, then it's like you're not going to be effective at your job.
Absolutely. I think it's almost the difference between like a good analyst, whatever type of analyst, and a great one is that person who can communicate the team player. I work with a lot of Americans, and they often, I used to have a boss who said his main talent was woo. And he says winning others over, and that was his like whole thing. He would just woo everybody, and he was great at it, to be fair. And everything runs so smoothly with him and around him because you all went to work for this great guy.
Is that what the acronym actually means? Like, I'm going to woo them, win them over?
Oh, I don't know about that.
I've never heard of that before.
Let's pull that one. That's quite an old Shakespearean type of thing, isn't it?
I just pulled that one out of my backside.
Check that in the comments for us guys. But going back, Kyree, to when you talk about dealing with, so Rob and I used to work in a SOC. You come to us and you described how you kind of want to make it a partnership, not be this guy who appears and then disappears and pisses everyone off. How has your background doing the computer science degree or anything else, but the tech being a bit more technical, helped you kind of interact with those types of stakeholders?
I would say that my technical foundation allows me to ask the right questions and like limit the time that like other people's time that I might waste. So If I'm going to do a risk assessment, like an internal risk assessment for an operation, right? So like SOC stands for Security Operations Center for people who like don't know. And if there's a process that you guys are doing that could be more efficient, or that there's some sort of technology that could be integrated into that process to make it better and to make your life easier, and to make the life of whatever stakeholders you guys are serving easier. Me being able to understand what a security incident and event management system is, or me being able to understand what an intrusion detection system is, and I might not be an expert at it, but when you send over the documentation, it's like, okay, I know enough about this stuff for me to be able to go online and kind of do my own research so that I don't have to bug them with like more questions and waste more of their time and annoy them even more. So that's how it's probably helped me the most. I would say it's contributed to the soft skill aspect that we were just talking about before.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, knowing where to kind of fill in the gaps is a really valuable skill as well. And I when I heard you talk about how you love interacting with all different teams, my current role is in product, and I do the same. Where I talk with the engineers, I talk with threat intel, I talk with SOC, I talk with marketing people as well who don't know the slightest things technically sometimes, and I really enjoy that. I love being exposed to so many different pieces because you do get to. It's always different. You get to learn different stuff. You can always be growing internally and educating yourself because who knows what role we're going to be taking next. That's the kind of the nature of this tech game, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rob, you love a curveball question. I was also thinking that when you would love those ways to try and bring out someone's soft skills. He asked me when I first met him, day one, he was my mentor in my new job. I was terrified. And he asked me what fruit I would be. So, Kyree, I want to ask you, what fruit would you be?
What fruit would I be? Let me think about that.
That's a weird one.
I've never been asked that question before.
Do you know what other question we floated in our school community the other day was, if you were going to be a piece of malware, what piece of malware do you think you would be and why? So you can either answer either one.
I'll do both. I'll say, so in terms of like the fruit, I would say I'd probably be a blueberry because they're like antioxidants. Like you get antioxidants from them.
There you go.
And I clean up fat. You know what I mean? So that's what antioxidants do. Is like there's I guess I'm not a scientist, but like the way that I understand it is that there's like.
I love how you're like relating that back to your GRC role as well.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? So
that's so good.
GRC is all about like process improvement, process efficiency. Right, making sure that we're reaching the organizational goals as as operationally efficient as possible. And I feel like that's the reason that I eat blueberries in the morning, is to kind of give me that kind of wake me up and kind of like clean that like fat out of what are my neurotransmitters. So
yeah. Great answer. Better than what I gave.
The cleanser. I love it.
Cleanser, the human antioxidant, Kyree.
Yeah.
I love it.
That or a watermelon.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'd be a Trojan horse because I'm able to kind of like play all these different hats, and I'm able to like kind of disguise myself in these different kind of ways where I can integrate into any team. You know, I can go over here to the SOC team and I can talk to you about SOC. I can go over to the solution architects and I can talk to you a little bit about AWS, maybe not a whole lot. I can talk to you a little bit about Azure, maybe not a whole lot. I can go over here with finance and I can talk to you about finance. I can go over here to legal and I can talk to you about contracts. So I'm able to kind of disguise myself into a bunch of different forms, but what I'm really looking for is that documentation.
Yeah. Give me those docs.
Give me those docs.
I've got another question for you. So this is a hypothetical scenario. I'm 17, 18 years old. I'm either in the UK or I'm in the US. I'm thinking about potentially, getting into GRC or even just cybersecurity in general. I don't really know where to turn. Where would I go? What would I do in this moment? Is it important to, try and go down that traditional route of the college or university in the UK, or is there somewhere else that I can go?
There's a couple ways I'm going to answer this question. The first thing is, if we're talking about finances and you just look at the bare bones of what it means to invest, right? It's like I put money in and I want to get more money out. So if you see a career that's going to pay you, I mean, it's common in the cybersecurity industry, whether you're doing SOC, whether you're doing GRC, whatever you're doing, it's kind of like the common thing to get paid over 6 figures once you've had, a couple years in the industry, 3 years in the industry. At least that's the way that I've seen it.
That little 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I broke 6 figures after my 2nd year in the industry.
Yeah. Wow. Now, UK listeners, we don't get paid quite as well as they do in the States, but hey, there's a lot of we get a lot of other perks and benefits, I think, because we've seen people get fired on like that in the US, and we have to go through a whole consultation thing. So I think swings and roundabouts, but yeah, just a little level set for we got a global audience, but that is interesting.
So yeah, I would say that like from an investment perspective, even if it's like, even if it's not 6 figures, right? Like right off the bat, if you look at, you pay for college once, right? And then like, let's say you go to college for, let's just make it an easy number, 20 grand, right? Let's say your college tuition, you pay 20 grand to go to school, and you get paid a salary of 60K when you're done college, but you're getting paid that salary of 60K and it's increasing for pretty much your entire career, right? Like that's like a clear return on investment if you look at it from just like a time perspective and a money in versus money gain perspective over time. Mm-hmm. So there's that aspect of it. Now, I think personally that the college university education system, the trust in that system is decreasing because people are like, I feel like 10, 15 years ago, you went to college and you were pretty much guaranteed a job coming out of school. Now it's like you can go to college and you can spend 30, 40 grand at university, and it's like you get the piece of paper, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a job. So now people are looking at alternative forms of education. I think the big problem is a lot of institutions are run by people who come from that traditional college, like go to college, get a job kind of thing. And so the way that they run their company is based off of that, right? They want to see people come in, they want to see that you have a bachelor's degree, and that's that, right? That's what their minimum qualification is. So in terms,
that's the tick box in HR when you apply and they're looking through your resume. If has he got a bachelor's? Yes or no. If he hasn't,
exactly.
Yeah, there's going to be those companies.
I think that if you don't want to go the school route, which I think is completely reasonable, like school's not for everyone. It was barely for me. So if you don't want to go the school route, you have to understand. Like a lot of people say, I don't want to go to school for 4 years. And it's like, well, what are you willing to do for 4 years? Because you're not guaranteed. If you don't go to school, you're not guaranteed a job. If you go to school, you're not guaranteed a job. If you do X, Y, and Z boot camp, you're not guaranteed a job. If you do X, Y, and Z certification, the only way that you can guarantee yourself a job is if you put in the work continuously and just do it until it works. So like when people come to me and they say, well, I don't want to go to school for 4 years. It's like, well, is this something that you really want to do? Because is it a time like when people come to me and say that they don't want to pay the financial commitment for school, I say, fair enough. But when they say, I don't want to go to school for 4 years, I'm like, well, what are you willing to do for 4 years? What are you willing to do for 8 years? Like, how long are you willing to endure, the grind that it takes to be able to break into this industry? Like, how long are you willing to do that? Because if you just want like a quick turnaround, then maybe this isn't the industry for you.
No. That's really good advice, because I think it's just the way internet culture is now. We expect instant gratification from things. There's all these get rich quick schemes that you go flying about. So and so made 7K after 1 month with us in this course. That's not realistic. And it's one of the reasons we kind of vibe with you quite well is that you're very realistic with your advice that you give, and that this is something that's worthwhile doing, but it is going to be tricky to do it. So there are so many different ways. You've mentioned how the kind of the old fashioned, the dinosaur kind of hiring guy who's like, hey, I need to see the bachelor's degree or whatever. We're seeing that change a little bit in cybersecurity, that they are recognizing, one, we don't have enough skilled people to do this job. Two, different backgrounds, different experiences actually leads to a better outcome because it's a real team sport. So we're seeing that the kind of doing self-certifications, other, mentorship programs, or kind of just self-serve. You can just learn everything off YouTube pretty much, and you'd be a very capable cybersecurity analyst. Is GRC, is that the same? Is there stuff that's just freely available out there? Say if I am willing to put 3 years of my time, I have a part-time job and I'll dedicate myself to my study. Is there stuff out there? And is that a viable way to get into GRC, or is it a little bit behind maybe where we're thinking cybersecurity is right now in that respect?
I think that GRC in particular is a little bit behind that curve. And it's funny because GRC is kind of behind the curve in cybersecurity in a lot of perspectives. Like even when you look at like the DevSecOps movement and like all of the technology that's been integrated into security operations, right? Like GRC is just starting to kind of like get that holistic technological kind of infrastructure around GRC processes, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole podcast.
Yeah.
The speed of compliance.
I see people come into GRC from accounting backgrounds, right? Because the audit nature of accounting. I see people come into GRC from legal backgrounds. I see people come into GRC from like forensic backgrounds, and I see people come into GRC from IT and information security backgrounds. So like the thing about GRC is because it's like a niche, broad field in a way, because it's like, yeah, like it's GRC, but GRC has so many different components to it that it's kind of similar to what you were saying before. It's kind of like these different backgrounds. Like I've worked with people who have their CISSP. I've worked with people who don't have any certifications at all. And the person that I worked with who had their CISSP didn't go to college. So yeah, there's ways to get into GRC without having to go that traditional route.
Interesting.
I just think like a culture perspective, it's like, I just don't think we're quite as caught up as we need to be in terms of giving people a chance who maybe don't come from that traditional background. I think that's unfortunate. And I don't agree with it.
Well, a few years' time, maybe you'll be at the top of that pile and start to maybe affect some of the change in how these hiring practices are. But until this conversation, I didn't really realize you could get an entry-level role in GRC. To me, it always seemed like something you move horizontally to after having some experience in all those kind of fields you mentioned. So that's interesting for me to see that is a kind of an entry position as you did it after, admittedly after 4 internships, so you're probably pretty qualified after that. But hey.
Yeah, I think my situation was a little bit unique just because I did have so much internship experience, and I did IT help desk for 4 years when I was in college. And I worked at an accounting firm when I was in high school. So I had sort of like that corporate-y kind of like attitude going in. So like I knew how to interview well already because I had been exposed to those atmospheres a lot earlier than a lot of my peers. So I think that helped a lot. I was also really clear on like what my skills were, what I wanted to do, what I was good at, what I wasn't good at. And kind of like you, Josh, even though I wasn't like super good at programming, I really like to break down processes and understand like how systems work. And, I always ask the question, why? Like, well, why are we doing it this way and not that way? Or why does this API connect here when we can pull data from this other source or whatever? So I'm probably going on. Yeah, I'm a big picture guy for sure. Yeah, I kind of forget what we were in.
So is it too complicated then for somebody that's new? Do you think that they have to go through the traditional route of going to college and then potentially trying to get an internship, or is there like an outlier certification that they could maybe try and focus on? Yeah. Is there like a group? Are there any groups that they could join, network in?
Yeah, I think that from a certification perspective, GRC's funny because it's not like it's not security, it's not cybersecurity like natively, right? So, but there are GRC specific certifications. ISC2 has a really good one, which is the Certified in Governance, Risk and Compliance. I hear that's a really good certification to take. Funny enough, the Certified in Cybersecurity certification from ISC2 for GRC, like it's not as technical as like a Security Plus or like a CYSA, but it gives you that like foundational information security knowledge. I also like to make the distinction between like information security and cybersecurity. But The hard thing about GRC and cybersecurity without that college component is that cybersecurity, you can kind of do like projects and you can build like home labs. There's no like home lab for GRC, or there's no like with GRC, if I were to recommend for someone to want to build a portfolio for themselves, I would say to do case studies. So map the ISO 27001 controls to the NIST cybersecurity framework controls and figure out what the similarities are and figure out what the gaps are. That would be a really good GRC project for someone to do. Build your own risk register and like with Python, or build your own risk register with Excel, and build a risk methodology on like how do you track risk, how do you rate risk, how do you categorize risk, how do these risks, and then like map those risks in your risk register to the control standards of SOC 2 or to the control. It's hard to do with ISO because none of their stuff is free online, or like NIST cybersecurity framework. So those are the sorts of things that I would say to do from a project perspective if you were interested in getting in the GRC field without going sort of like the traditional route. And I think that's kind of like an exclusive tip because I haven't really heard anyone online say that. So like that's the way that I would go about it. I don't really have experience with that, but that's the way that I would kind of approach it if you were trying to approach it in a similar way that I see a lot of the like natively cybersecurity guys do it, or girls do it when they when they come into the industry without that college degree.
That's pretty brilliant because I'd not heard. I've been hunting those type of maps in a personal capacity sometimes where I want to just see how, because you have to conform to different compliance standards, but often there's so much overlap. But I've never really seen great areas it's been documented that this is equivalent here, you've got this and so on. So if someone was to create that and share that on the internet, I would download that. So people would download that. That would make you look pretty damn good to a hiring manager. But great tip, because we talk about creating experience for yourself. Don't wait for getting that first job. You can have IT help desk is a great one, and then create some of your specific security or GRC related work yourself by doing projects. And I hadn't heard of a GRC equivalent one, so thank you so much for sharing that. But
it's looking at the job roles that are out there and what is required in that role, taking a look at the specifications, and then trying to center some either tasks or projects around the different criteria that exists within that role. And then you can apply for the interview. If you get into the interview, you can say, hey, this is what I think that I'm expected to be doing in this role, and here I've created some documentation around this to showcase that I've got some experience in this field.
Yeah. And even from a certification perspective, like I would say to get familiar with like GRC tools. So like Archer is like a huge GRC tool that's used for risk registers, right? Like that's how organizations, large organizations track risk, and you can map your risk to controls, and you can map issues that happen in the organization to risk, like from risk assessments that you do. Usually issues will come out of a risk assessment, and then you can map those issues to the risk that you have inside of your risk register, and it can give your organization kind of like a holistic perspective or a heat map on where risk kind of lies within the organization or within the IT infrastructure of the organization. So Archer is a really good tool to use. ServiceNow is also a really good thing to get certified in. To just know how to like build out ServiceNow modules, or just to use ServiceNow. Like we work in ServiceNow pretty heavily. Those are the two big ones from a technology perspective in terms of like GRC tools. And there's obviously, depending on if you're doing like consulting or whatever, there's obviously the big players like Vanta out there, and Drata. UpGuard is another good one. Trust Cloud is another good like GRC platform. So getting familiar with some of that stuff, I think, would also be a really good thing for anybody who's looking into this space. That would be a good thing for them to do.
Awesome stuff. Thanks. Yeah, and Rob, I know you've done a bit of a classroom on some ITSMs. Is it Zendesk the one you use? Because actually that's the stuff that nobody tells you in a certification, that you're actually going to need these type of skills when it comes to your day-to-day job, and they're quite easy to go and get hands-on experience with that. And it looks great on the CV if you can say proficient with X, Y, and Z platform, because they're ubiquitous. But
yeah,
Kyree,
you can spin up a free trial for Zendesk, or probably even ServiceNow. There might be some hurdles that you might have to jump through. Maybe buy a domain, set up an official email address to be able to sign up to ServiceNow for a 14-day demo. But you can get around those hurdles to get your hands on the tools. And there's a lot of documentation out there. There's YouTube videos. But yeah, that's really useful. All of the everything that you've been saying before about the tasks and projects that you could be focusing on, and all the tools as well. Because there's going to be a lot of people out there that are interested in cyber, interested in, you know, GRC. They maybe want to dip their toes into the industry, but they are scared because they feel like they wouldn't be able to excel in a really technical role. So this is something that they could do well in.
Yeah, and I think one more thing to just add on to that point is like the way of like job acquisition is different than it. Like people need to accept that the job acquisition process is different than it used to be in the past. You have to be more creative now. Right, you have to have talent. Obviously, you have to have all your bases covered. So, like, if that means you have to be developing a personal or professional brand for yourself online on LinkedIn, and you know, making sure that you're a recognized voice in this space, right? Like, that's part of what I'm doing right now with my content, everything like that, right? Like, people, like, if you're interviewing me, I can tell my interviewer, like, I make governance, risk, and compliance content all the time. Here's my TikTok, or I make governance, compliance content or cybersecurity content or whatever all the time. Here's my newsletter. Here's my blog. Here's my this. Here's my that. And that separates me from a lot of the competition because most people are just not willing to do the creative, like different things that can just give you that extra push and just separate you out from everyone has the security plus. Everyone has this, everyone has this college degree. When you're able to kind of do those little extra things, I think that they make a big difference, especially if the difference is you not having any money at all versus you having an $80,000 salary.
And so just try things as well. Like put yourself out there. Like us, we're all content creators now because we have to be, because we've chosen to go down that path. And a lot of people are scared to do that. Some people are even scared to just document their journey. You know, create a LinkedIn, let everybody know that you're interested in cybersecurity, start connecting with people, messaging people saying, hey, I'm concentrating on this certification. Here's what I'm learning today. Here's what I'm struggling with. They don't want to show that level of vulnerability online, which is fine. But at the same time, it can be useful for you.
I think a lot of the thing is people are scared to, everybody thinks they need to be an expert to like, to like show them, like to show themselves off. It's like, you don't have to be an expert. Like you can literally get on LinkedIn and ask questions all day, right? That's going to be doing more than the person who's not on LinkedIn doing anything at all.
Exactly. Great advice, Joyce. So it's about standing out, and there's some great tips that you've put here, both of you, for how people can stand out. But also just find your own way, because there's so many different ways to stand out. Do whatever suits you. Just find a way to put yourself out there. Get uncomfortable doing it. This certainly makes us uncomfortable sometimes. I think I could speak for all three of us when I say that. But yeah, there's huge benefits to it as well. So find something that works for you and something that other people aren't going to be doing. Because if you're part of that herd, I think this is why university and college degrees are kind of becoming less and less valued, because they're like, hey, okay, you got a good baseline, but how are you different from the last guy who was churned out from there? So I want to kind of bring us to a close here, really. And Kyree, I want to ask, hey, if I'm looking to get into GRC, no matter whether I'm transitioning from another role, whether I'm trying to start to get into it, how can you help me, you personally?
Me personally. So I don't really offer like education services, really. Like I can point you to all the best education for GRC that's out there. And I can mentor you through your journey. So like, I'll talk to you about if GRC is really what you want, because a lot of people come to me and they say, hey, I want to get into cybersecurity, or I want to get into GRC. And then we really uncover that they want the lifestyle of cybersecurity, or they want the lifestyle of GRC, but really their skill set and their interest might be aligned with something else. Perfectly fine, no harm, no foul. But I think that clarity is the most underrated asset of like human nature. And that's what I help people achieve, is clarity on where they're going and what they're trying to do. I help people cut through all of the noise of take this boot camp, take that boot camp. I can look at the curriculum and tell you whether it's going to be worth your time and worth your money. I can point you to all of the resources that you'll need: free resources, paid resources, communities, workshops. I look at university curriculums to see if it will be a good university curriculum to take. I help, particularly though, the people that I can help the most are people that have some sort of foundation. whether that's educational, and then I help them kind of get over that next hump when it comes to like, you know, building a brand for themselves on LinkedIn, building a brand for themselves on social media, and really those differentiating factors that help push you over the edge after you have sort of like all of your baselines complete. Those are the people that I can help the most. But yeah, man, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm pretty active on TikTok. I'm pretty active on Instagram. I have a mentorship group called the Cyber Circle. The link is usually in my bio if that's something that you guys are interested in. But yeah, man, I'm very mentorship focused.
Awesome. Yeah, mentorship is so valuable. So if you're interested, go check him out. And I can almost hear, as you were talking there, and all the things that you can offer, back to the first part of this podcast where you told us about the living assistant. Was that it?
All right, yeah, the residence assistant.
The resident assistants who kind of pointed you towards GRC in the first place. And that's kind of what mentorship is all about, right? Kind of just be passing this down to the next person. Kind of somebody help me up, give me a leg up. I'm going to try and do the same for the next person who needs it. So
yeah,
awesome.
She helped me every aspect of it. It wasn't just like, here's GRC, like go figure it out. It was like, here's GRC. Here's how you go into these corporate environments and like act appropriately. Here's how you write a resume correctly. Here's how you relay your value in a resume. So a lot of times what I see in resume reviews, when I do resume reviews for people, is they'll have themselves positioned as an assistant as opposed to an integrated part of the team. So like they'll say something like in the bullet points, you know how you'll see a resume and you'll see the bullet points and it'll say like assisted with X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. It's like you're positioning yourself as like this like person who's not integrated into the team and doing work that actually matters. And that could be the difference between you getting a job and you not getting a job. So, you know, she helped me with all that sort of stuff, positioning, staying motivated, staying focused, introducing me to all the different opportunities that were out there. So if she sees this, she'll know who I'm talking about. So thank you.
That's a cool little full circle moment. And yeah, everything is important, isn't it? It's not just knowing what you need to know. It's the soft skills, it's building out your resume, it's knowing how to interact in that corporate environment, how to even interact in that interview setting. Yeah, sounds like you can help out with all of that. Do you want to just quickly plug your Instagram and TikTok handle? We'll link it in the description anyway, but
yeah, my Instagram is Kyree Fuller. But it's like Fuller is spelled Fuller, but on Instagram it's spelled with a V because the other one was like taken.
Yeah.
And my TikTok is, I believe it's Kyree Fuller spelled the regular way with an underscore. Something like that. You guys will find it.
Yeah, you should find it, the listeners.
Nice. Well, thank you so much.
That's your first cybersecurity, like.
Yeah, that's the task. You passed that.
Yeah, you don't find it. You don't deserve his time.
Yeah,
or his content. But thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's really great having you on, kind of hearing about much more about GRC. I've learned a lot, and it's kind of an adjacent function that I have had some interaction with, but actually to kind of get other pieces from you and your approach to it was really, really insightful and refreshing. So I'm sure the listeners have got something from this as well. And yeah, anything else we want to end on, gents, before we roll out the carpet and say goodbye?
I just like to say thanks for having me on the podcast, man. I love what you guys are doing. So keep up the good work.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, man. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thank you to the listeners, everybody who's dialing in, wherever you are in the world, listening to this, wherever the platforms, engage with us, leave comments. Maybe we can get Kyree on here again if you give us a good enough reason to. So drop in the comments what you might want to hear, what questions you might want us to pose to him if we were to get him on again. And if you enjoyed this, if you enjoyed hearing from myself and Robbie and all the empirical trainers and our friends who are also in the industry, you can get more of us, right? Go to school.com/cybersec. That's the best way to have access to us day in, day out. You don't have to wait for our weekly podcast drops. And actually, you can help us inform some of these as well, because we often talk about topics that we started off that were kind of born in the community discussion there. Or you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, etc. for empirical training. You know where to find us. You might probably already are a follower. But thank you very much for listening. This has been the CyberSpace podcast. I've been Josh. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Kyree. And we'll see you next week.
That's a wrap.
Oh, it's a calm wrap today.